So ladies first. So we have Dr. Yelena Kropinskaya, which is a strategic-minded and result-driven data scientist and analytics leader. She has launched different projects and publication, and she is experienced in predictive modeling and machine learning. She has 7 years of research and industry experience in that practice. We have also Liam. I forget to mention. So Yelena is based in Manitoba, and Liam is based in Pennsylvania. Yes. So Liam is a data scientist and senior consultant at Willis Towers Watson, with over 7 years of experience in insurance. And his focus is helping insurers to build predictive modeling and AI solution for pricing, underwriting, and claim solution. Okay. And the floor is yours, guys. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Frederick. And thank you, everyone, for joining the session today. I'm just going to bring up my presentation and I'll get started. So Yelena and I are going to be talking to you about text analytics, and we're really excited about this topic and want to start off by just covering why it's such an important topic in insurance and you know, the analytics space here. One of the challenges with unstructured text data is figuring out, you know, how to kind of corral it and put it into a format that we can get some value out of. So we'll talk a little bit about those challenges and how to approach those challenges. Talk a little bit about feature engineering, so how to take our text data and turn it into features that we can use in predictive modeling or you know, other analysis. But I want to point out that some of the focus here is really going to be on showing how text analytics can be used in some practical situations to really kind of show, you know, how we can use this this interesting topic in insurance. So most of the focus will be on that kind of practical example. We'll cover an underwriting case study, and then Yelena will cover a couple claims case studies. And I just want to note that we won't get into a lot of technical details. So, you know, given the limited time, we'll cover some high-level information on the technical part, but really the focus will be more on the case study part. And we'll try to kind of point you towards resources, you know, and give you some ideas of things that you can go off and then look into on your own if you're curious to know, you know, more on the technical details. So, you know, why are you all here to hear about text data? Well, insurance is, you know, there are numerous data sources really across the business in insurance, where we've got a lot of text data collected through our normal business operations. And, you know, whether you're in, you know, underwriting and you're looking at loss control surveys, or you're in claims and you're looking at claim handler notes, there is a lot of information that, you know, we currently have, but maybe we don't really have access to or haven't had access to traditionally for predictive modeling purposes, or you know, for really analyzing. It's often just kind of sitting there for, you know, maybe the claims handler to go back and check what they wrote down. But it really presents an untapped opportunity for increasing the information that we have for our predictive models. And by looking into these data sources more, what we can do is, first of all, make the most of this data that we already have sitting around. So, like I said, in many cases, this is kind of, you know, collected through just our normal business operations, and it might be used, you know, for some kind of, you know, small operational tasks, but for the most part, you know, it hasn't really been tapped yet. And by using text mining, we can make sure that we're not just wasting this really valuable information. The second thing is that we've got structured data, which is our typical modeling data. We've got fields that we have structured, but the downside to those structured fields is that by structuring them, we've lost some of the information. So, free-form text really presents an opportunity to get more nuance and to fill in some of the gaps that we might have in our structured data. And finally, especially in the area of underwriting and claims, where we have often experts like underwriters and claims handlers who are writing down their notes or writing up reports on policies and claims. And so we have a lot of internal knowledge through those experts, but often people often use information differently, and so by text mining, what we can do is quantify the information that those experts have, and also help smooth out some of the variation that might exist in the decision making of those experts. But the important part to note here is that this isn't saying, oh, we can just take this text and we don't care about, we don't need the experts anymore. This is really allowing us to just better use that information that those internal experts have. So I want to get a sense before we get too much further of how, where everyone on the call here is in terms of their company's experience using unstructured text data. So we should be able to launch a poll here, and just go ahead and answer kind of, on a scale here from not really using at all up to, you're really getting a lot of benefit out of this already. Just want to see, where you think your company is on this. So let's see, do we have a poll up?
Yes.
Okay, I see. Great. Okay, I'm not sure. I don't think I can see how many responses we have, but yeah, okay, there we go. All right, so so interesting results, right? I think this is in line with kind of what I was expecting. So a lot of people who aren't using this yet, some people who have maybe started to try to use it haven't really seen a benefit yet, and then a decent amount of people who have already seen some benefit, but with room for improvement. And I think that's kind of exactly what I expected. Hopefully, one of the goals of this presentation will be to help people, see a little bit more clearly, if you're not using it yet, where text analytics can help you. And it's interesting. We've got our own little kind of survey group here, but at Willis Towers Watson, we did a more formal survey, actually a couple surveys, one in 2017, one in 2019, and asked people about different data sources that they use. And one of the interesting findings was in 2017, when we asked companies, do you think you're going to be using these unstructured data sources? So, internal claim information, underwriting information. Do you expect to use that 2 years from now in 2019? A lot of people said yes. You can see, 50% or more thought they would be using it in 2 years. But if we looked at, what actually happened in 2019 when we asked again, how many companies are using this information internally, only, a much smaller percentage of companies were using these data sources. And so there's really a gap there in, where the potential that people see in this and what has actually been realized so far. And then just the last column there shows you that even though there is this gap, there's still a lot of optimism. As people were looking towards 2021, a lot of companies still were expecting that they would, incorporate these data sources. And so, in order to close that gap and to kind of help actually realize this potential that is there, natural language processing is going to be very important in helping us extract value out of that unstructured data. And so, the challenge with unstructured data is that it's very messy. So I've got an example claim note here. And if we just kind of, look through this claim note, you can start to see some of the issues with analyzing it and, doing it on a large scale. There are, what we call junk words or stop words, where words that don't add a lot of value, right? Things like the word the, or, articles like an or a. These words don't really add a lot to our understanding of the text, but they're also really common in text. So those can definitely kind of muddy the waters when we're trying to analyze data. We also have things like numbers and formatting. And then we have, words that might mean different things. So we might have multiple meanings for a single word, which is called polysemy. Or we could have multiple words that have the same meaning, which is called synonymy. And those both can make it more difficult to to analyze text data because it's not always clear, right, which meaning of a word without looking at more context. Negation is also something that presents a challenge, and in some cases it's very clear negation, right? We might have the word no or not right before another word. But often, negation can be more subtle and difficult to pick up on. And so that definitely presents a challenge when we're trying to analyze text data. And then finally, text data, especially if we're talking about insurance text data, often there are a lot of domain-specific abbreviations and acronyms that we have to deal with. And so a lot of research and effort is put into figuring out, well, how do we get from this messy text here into something cleaner that can then be put into, a feature engineering step. And so, typically there's a pipeline that will put our text through to process it and kind of clean it up and get it ready to generate features that we can use in our modeling or analysis. So, a couple things here that that might be worth pointing out. Tokenization. So if anyone's not familiar with that term, basically the idea is taking our long string of text and breaking it up into words. Often the tokens that we want to get out of a chunk of text are the words, but they could also be sentences, even paragraphs. We'll also often do, filtering. So really short words, maybe like 2 letters, 1 letter, those might not provide a lot of value to us. We can try to map the abbreviations and acronyms that we have. We can also try to remove a lot of those junk words that show up a lot, but don't actually, add much to our understanding. And then the last one that I'll point out here is the n-gram generation. So the idea here being that, an n-gram is just a sequence of n words together. So we might look at bigrams, which are, basically a 2-gram, where we've got pairs of words that show up together. And these can help our understanding of the text by providing a little more context. So basically, running all of our data through this pipeline, we can then get it ready for feature generation, and then we can get features that we can go into our predictive models with. Just to touch on some of the common feature engineering approaches that are out there, we'll cover a few of these in the case studies, but ranging from kind of less complex to more complex. So word indicators are something where you're basically just looking at, the presence of a word in a document. So this can be helpful. Maybe we want to search for the word litigation within a claim note. That might tell us something. But this is also really basic, and so it doesn't do a good job of picking up on context or some of those other things like negation or words that have multiple meanings. Sentiment analysis is a pretty common approach where we're trying to look at whether a document or whether the words in a document are positive or negative. Topic models are something that I'll touch on in my underwriting case study. And the idea here is that we're trying to look for topics or themes that show up in the text, and these can help us, understand what a document, what a claim note or an underwriting report is really talking about, and that can be useful in our predictive modeling. Word embedding and transformers. So these will be examples that Yelena will cover. And both of these attempt to basically take our text data and turn it into numeric vectors, because it's a lot easier to work with numeric vectors than it is a long string of messy text. So word embeddings, these are a little bit simpler way of translating the words into numeric vectors. Transformers, this is a kind of a set of approaches that does a little bit more complex work to understand longer term dependencies and kind of help us understand, for example, like an entire sentence. So topic modeling, I touched on that briefly, and the case study that I'm going to present here shows topic modeling as a way that we approached an underwriting model project where the goal for us was segmenting risks using structured data that we had about a business, but also underwriting reports. So things like loss control surveys, basically where we have a lot of text that explains, what a business is doing, that what risks it might have, that sort of thing. And our approach to this was to use topic modeling. So I won't go into the details on the theory behind topic modeling, but just to give a sense for kind of what topic modeling gives us, what it can tell us about a document. So if we think about a document here as, for example, an underwriting report or loss control survey for a business. So some of the topics that we got in our analysis, you can see here, they're defined by the most common words for that topic. And if we look at those most common words, we can quickly get a sense for what the topic is picking up on. So we have, a couple topics that are picking up on different farming activities. So, a business that is performing farming activities like those. We also have some information about, drug testing or other, kind of safety program type information. So if we look at a sample document, we might see each of these topics showing up within the document. And the nice thing about topic modeling is that it'll give us a proportion for each topic for that document. And these proportions here, so, for example, topic 1, 40%, this is basically a new feature that I can put into a predictive model. And, that a high proportion of topic 1 might tell me something useful about that policy that I wouldn't have from my structured data. And when we put these into our predictive model alongside those other structured fields, what we saw was that the topics we generated were really, powerful predictors. So if we look at it alongside, more traditional underwriting variables, so everything here is normalized to class. So, class is obviously very important for underwriting. Hazard groups, similarly, those both tell us a lot about the, the type of business. But even after accounting for those, the topic features that we generated still added a lot of value. So you can see they're even more important than, geodemographic variables. And you can look on the right there and see some of the sample topics that were picked up here. And you can kind of understand, what these topics are picking up on. So the first two are picking up on sort of safety equipment, safety program information. The third one is covering, a bit more nuance about the type of business and what type of work that they do, which might tell us, what type of risk they are. So topic modeling is really a way of getting a lot more information from the text data, and they have been shown, to really be predictive in underwriting models and as well as claims models. So I'll turn it over to Yelena now to cover the two claims cases.
Thank you, Liam. So I'm gonna show you a couple of outcomes and results we received in claims domain, but I would like to provide a little bit more context and information before we jump into the results. So the first case study was performed on the data for one of Canadian jurisdictions. So it's in Ontario, and it's related to auto incidents specifically. And it's about independent medical examinations. So independent medical examination is a tool that helps insurance companies in Ontario to determine if the cause of injury associated with the incident and if the treatment that claimant is getting matching claimant conditions. And as a result, it helps us to mitigate the risk of injury deterioration and prolonged disability duration and long term. So our goal here was to understand our current spend and really optimize our future spend on independent medical examinations, because we paid, in addition to the medical and rehabilitation costs that we already have, and we wanted to really minimize the premium impact by ordering these exams on all of our policyholders. Before doing text mining analysis, we did analysis on structured data. And we noticed some interesting things, but we also noticed that the data quality associated, structured data quality associated with independent medical exams is not good enough. So that's why we really wanted to apply text mining to augment our structured data from unstructured source. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see the results on one technique that we applied here. So first thing that we did here, we applied a technique called embeddings. And this technique, Liam mentioned previously, allows us to turn words into numbers. To be more accurate, I would say we're really turning words into vectors, not really numbers, based on their semantic value. And you can see this cluster of words in the middle of the slide. So this is around 65,000 words that we had in our claim notes from our adjusters on the claims that we either ordered or didn't order independent medical exams. And you can see that here, the words are not evenly distributed, but they are clustering in clusters, and these clusters have different density of words. And in each clusters, we have semantically similar inputs that are getting closer to each other. So one cluster example, orange one on the top left, you can see there are words generally associated with the time. So this is words like a day of the week, or month name, or words like AM, PM appeared on this cluster. Then light blue cluster, you can see contains words on make and models. And what you can see interesting here, there are two words, Chevy and Chevrolet, where we didn't apply a lot of cleaning to this data set, but because these words semantically very, very close to each other. So by turning these words into embeddings, gave us them in the same cluster, which is a very interesting outcome. Then on the right-hand side, you can see two other clusters, and they are associated to medical exams and any kind of like exams on our claims. So you can see some kind of treatments in the red cluster. So you can see X-rays and ultrasounds. And then in purple cluster, you see words associated with the mental health. So what was interesting here, after we noticed this, we took embeddings and we built classification model on top of these embeddings using algorithm called blazing text. And we can see the results on the next slide, the results of the classification algorithm. So what we learned that there are some words and there are some clusters associated with either higher or lower probability of ordering independent medical exams. And you can see on low probability end, there is nothing that really stands out. But when we look at the higher end, there are some interesting findings. Again, mental health factors appear here. So you can see words like psychiatry, psychiatrist. And also you cannot actually see that because I masked that word in the red box here, but it was one of the legal firm names in Ontario. And when I first seen it, it was a little bit weird and we couldn't explain it with my data science team. But when we got back to our claims adjusters, it was a known fact. And usually the claims that we're getting with assistance of that specific legal term, our adjusters know that we potentially would need to order independent medical exams with. So these two factors, mental health and legal involvement, was not represented in the way we found it from text mining in our structured data. So that's why these two were very interesting insights that allowed us to redefine some business rules around ordering independent medical exams in the future, and also improve the practice that adjusters use to order independent medical exams. The other use case that I would like to show you is related to another Western Canadian province, Alberta. So in Alberta, again, for auto insurance, it's extremely important when incident happens, who is at fault? Because who is at fault is responsible for losses. And we, with my team, built something called subrogation models. So basically, we try to understand whose insurer should pay for the damages. And you can imagine that at fault indicator is very important in these models. What's interesting, we collect this indicator in our structured data. So there is a manual entry that adjusters perform first at FNL, at the first notice of loss. So they put it based on the story that claimant is telling. And then we can get later some police reports and some additional documentation. But these structured data column may be readjusted several times through claim lifetime. And what's interesting that sometimes adjusters forget to update it in the structured field, but they never forget to put a note into the claim notes if there is an update. So what we noticed like sometimes there is a discrepancy between structured and unstructured data. And here on the slide, you can see that. So on the top, I have a screenshot from our claim center system where you can see that it says that our insured liability is 0%. So this is something that adjuster entered into the system based on FNOL. And then in the unstructured notes, if you read it, you can see that in the last line, we're saying that send for 100% with our insured being held liable, TPA advised, etc. So you see that later we actually learned that our insured was 100% liable for losses in this case. So that's why we cannot really subrogate, and we're losing this right to subrogate. So in this case, we applied slightly different technique because even from this sentence on the previous slide, Liam, could you please go back? Even from that sentence on the previous slide, you can see here, just from the frequency of words, it's really, really hard to classify if this paragraph is about being liable or not liable for losses. So that's why we really needed a technique that would be able to understand context of the previous sentence or even the previous paragraph or even the previous claim note that we have in our claim notes. And here we use something that's being called bidirectional encoder representation, in short, BERT. So this technique and this set of models was trained by Google, and it's widely used. So usually when we use it, we just tune it with our data. We don't retrain them. But here I give you two examples and show how this algorithm works. So I have two examples. One is saying under IBC, we will be 100% at fault. And the other one saying under IBC, and here IBC, it's Insurance Bureau of Canada, we will not be at fault. And you can see if you look at the word frequency, and if you clean any stop words from these sentences, they're going to become very, very similar. So it's really hard to differentiate which one is really at fault and which one is not at fault. So here for my visualization, I use a technique and I show you attention patterns or attention heads. And this is really the words of the sentence with highlight where algorithm pays attention to make a prediction and classify if it's at fault or not at fault. So in the first example, you can see that it pays the most attention to the number 100. And that allows it to classify this sentence as being 100% at fault. And in the second example, you can see that it pays almost equal attention to the words "we will not fault." And it uses a combination of these words, because if you have slightly different combination, the attention pattern distribution may look very, very different. So this is a very complex technique. Usually it's extremely hard to visualize the results. And you know, like with machine learning, we even struggling sometimes with interpretability on structured data. So how to really get interpretability of unstructured data and models being built with unstructured data. So I want to share with you something that we learned with my team. So there are libraries. So this specific example, there is a KPM library. I think it's built by Facebook, but there are libraries that are available to us that allows us to really uncover the predictors and predictive power from different text features in the text. So for example, here you can see the example of report that we provided to our claim adjusters in order to correct insured at fault field. So in this case, in the system, the insured at fault indicator was 0%, but model is 94% sure that we should correct it. And it highlights in red the words that contributed negatively to this prediction and highlights in green the words that contribute positively in this prediction. So with the techniques that we mentioned today, on the next slide, there is a list of many libraries, and we have a lot of tools at our disposal. I want to recommend to you the library that we used in these examples that I showed today. So it's Hugging Face. There are a lot of pre-trained models there already that you can use for the text that you have. And I want to highlight again, what Liam mentioned in the beginning, that there are so many techniques from very, very simple ones, like word indicators, to very, very complex ones like transformers. And it's very, very quickly growing field. There are new models appearing, and there are models with short and long-term memory nowadays. And I'm pretty sure that each of you can find something valuable from some of these NLP techniques and generate additional insights from your data and potentially structure your, potentially augment your structured data and make better predictions with features that you generate from the text mining. So hopefully these three examples really show you the power of structured data, unstructured data, and show you some limitations that we learned with our teams If you have any questions, I'm not sure if we have time, but we are happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Yelena. We have time for maybe one question. If you want to post a question, you have the Q&A at the bottom. Let's give it 30 seconds to see if a question is popping up. I just would like to comment that first, thank you very much for the very interesting slide. We can see really how you know, like how powerful any conclusion or anything related to unstructured data can be useful a bit on claims or pricing. And I really believe personally that there is a lot that we can do with unstructured data. And I believe we have a lot of that in our industry, and is really the next stage in terms of servicing to the client, or even in terms of competition. Well, thank you again. We don't have a question, so thank you again for staying late in North America, and to all the participants and the audience. We are having a short break, time to refill the coffee, and let's talk again in a few minutes. Thank you.